In a village in a fantasy world, it is said that this place hates a certain person. Many of the citizens live peacefully among themselves, and a child plays joyfully with their mother. That is until this certain person passes by with a dark energy, completely changing the atmosphere among the inhabitants. And even though he apparently poses no danger, it is common sense not to look at him. After all, this is something normal to do when talking about the corpse scraper. And in this world, a corpse scraper is definitely someone hated. Sometime later, this boy arrives at an item shop, and upon entering scaring everyone, the shopkeeper asks what the boy wants there. Naturally, the customers start to leave. But without caring, the boy places a bag on the table and pours out what he wants to sell. For the shopkeeper, however, bringing in a load of scraps is not a good thing. Therefore, for someone like him, 3 copper coins are deemed sufficient, which is only 20% of the market price. The boy, in turn, yells that he will not accept this robbery, but the shopkeeper makes sure to remind the boy that he is nothing more than a trashy corpse scraper. In this world, there are beings that threaten the lives of humanity called monsters. And along these lines, those who make a living hunting these beasts are called adventurers. Adventurers face monsters day after day in search of high-grade materials with high rarity. By defeating their enemies, they gain levels, and even a single level difference can make a huge change in a person's power. In the end, in this world, levels are everything. And in a context where levels are a parameter of authority, our hero named Alka was someone unlucky enough to remain at level 1 for a very long time. Sometime later, at a nearby market, the boy asked the baker for some bread. And with a very pleasant energy, the man hands it over, saying he had already set some aside. Even so, the moment to pay was concerning because he was already out of money again. Suddenly, the baker commented that the boy should stop being an adventurer, and with an inviting expression, he suggested that maybe there could be something better for him. However, the protagonist knows it is too late for that because he is already known as a corpse looter. From the beginning, the boy always dreamed of being an adventurer, but when he finally became one, he learned that a curse had been placed upon him. Since that time, he has been unable to gain experience, making it impossible to improve by defeating enemies. First time the boy defeated a slime, a message appeared saying that he had failed to receive experience. Therefore, he became desperate to know how he could get stronger. At first, he decided to continue defeating monsters. Unfortunately, the messages about failing to gain experience kept appearing, and the hero, who fought believing that one day he would be able to level up, finally understood his reality and ran out of money. So eventually, without even realizing it, he ended up becoming someone who scavenged the corpses of monsters that other adventurers had killed, thus becoming part of the most miserable profession called corpse scraper. Since materials from level 1 monsters have no value, the only way to stay alive is by obtaining resources from high-level monsters. However, even while enjoying his bread, a group bumped into the boy, making his only food fall. And then one of them step on his food to remind the boy of his place as trash in the society they live in, which even though was something very cruel, did not seem to be rejected by the people to the protagonist's misfortune. The term corpse scavenger became popular in the city, and they hated Alka so much that it was difficult for him to get a normal job now. However, the fact was that he just wanted to fulfill his dream. And no matter how much others despised him, if he stopped collecting corpses, he would simply starve to death. Therefore, in the goblin's den, the hero hopes there are bodies that are worth some money. Suddenly, along the way, he smells something rotten, very different from normal. And unexpectedly, right in front of him, it turns out to the body of a dragon. Moreover, it seems it could even be a level 200 monster. Either way, Alka thinks that this is not the time to think about that because if it's dragon material, the price will be at least 10 times higher than the others. Obviously, the most valuable parts have already been taken, and the only thing left is the stinky pouch. This is an organ found in certain monsters that smells so bad that no one wants to open them. Suddenly, while rummaging through the pouch, the hero realizes that there is something inside. And when he cuts it open with his knife, a nearly intact full set of armor is revealed, which obviously leaves Alka very surprised by the discovery. Unexpectedly, the armor begins to emit an intimidating dark energy as he approaches, then the protagonist understands that this is not something he can handle right now. However, a mysterious voice asks the boy to wear it, and since there is no one else around, the most logical thought is that it is coming from the armor. Whatever it is, that armor is definitely dangerous, so the boy prepares to run. However, at this moment, he has the misfortune of encountering a horde of goblins. Already very worried about the situation, the hero tries to figure out when the monsters appeared, but he soon realizes that he made a mistake by letting his guard down during a scavenging. At this moment, they are all level 1. Just like him, the hero has no proper equipment, and besides that, being outnumbered, Alka believes that he's going to be killed. Right on the first attack, a goblin manages to disarm our hero, and with a frightened expression, he understands that this is it. He looks at all the monsters in front of him, fully certain that he's going to die. And so it will be in a horrible place like this that his miserable life will come to an end. The hero's entire life flashes before his eyes at this moment, but before accepting his fate, the voice calls him again. Now the energy seems to be even stronger, and the hero understands that he will probably be devoured by the armor. However, between being devoured by goblins or taking the benefit of the doubt, he decides to accept the offer. After all, that is much better than being devoured by a horde of monsters. With his willingness to wear it confirmed, the ownership registration is completed and the emergency installation is initiated. Therefore, even without moving, the dark energy comes toward Alka, and suddenly everything happens, leaving the monsters with a visible expression of fear on their faces. That's because the installation of the Abyss armor was successfully completed. This is the Abyss armor, so the hero asks if there's an ally, to which it replies that the owner's orders must be obeyed. In this case, Alka decides to trust its words for now. With two goblins approaching, the hero notices that the sword is quite sharp and similar to the one he used to wield. In the end, they are level 1 just like the protagonist. But with this sword, he can easily cut them down. And unbelievably, the monster's energy is concentrated until it leaves the lifeless body and transfers to Alka. Other goblins charge forward to try to attack our hero, but he also defeats them instantly, feeling his body become lighter. And once again, the energy of a monster is concentrated within the protagonist's body. Definitely, his body is getting lighter to the point where it barely feels like himself anymore. Then the power like this, Alka charges forward and seriously uses all his strength to defeat the remaining monsters on the battlefield in an instant. Thus, after the conflict comes the calm as he realizes the fact that he is still completely fine. For Alka, it was unbelievable to think that a level 1 could kill 5 goblins at once. But now about those mysterious lights that keep entering his body, it is said that they are power boosts. And to the hero's surprise, the message said that the levels have been absorbed, confirming an increase for Alka to level 6. Standing in front of the dragon and all the dead monsters, the system notifies that the levels have been absorbed and the owner's level confirmation as well. Then with the adventurer's unparalleled level drain, the protagonist tries to understand the meaning of being at level 6. Alka is confused because his body was supposed to be incapable of gaining experience. However, it is explained that the owner of the Abyss armor can use the unique ability called level absorption, where the boy will be able to absorb the levels of defeated enemies, which can be seen by looking at his status as a level 6 adventurer. The protagonist's level increase, and regarding the experience, he truly absorbed the power of the monsters he defeated. This became clear the moment he remembered the energies flowing into his chest. Therefore, Alka couldn't hold back his emotions from crying at that moment. But as he wiped his tears, he focused on the blessing he had just gained, the ability to level up. The truth was that the boy had been desperate, but now his body moved much more freely. And this was only after gaining a mere 5 levels, even changing the very way he walked. However, upon realizing that he is wearing an armor that came from inside that dead dragon, the protagonist thinks that he really does stink quite a lot. But anyway, it's thanks to this armor that he was able to level up. At this moment, the hero stops because he just thought of something interesting. This is enough to make him understand this revelation as something that changes everything. The truth is that in his case, killing all the monsters on this floor might really make him even stronger. Moreover, this armor does not seem to harm its wearer. And if that's the case, he should take full advantage of it to exterminate all the goblins. Suddenly, one of these goblins appears to fight without even needing to be searched for. However, its shadow shows that it is not a normal one like the others. And just by sensing its presence, Alfik gets scared because this is a place where there should only be weak goblins. Additionally, he gets even more frightened when he realizes that he's facing a legendary level 35 goblin. Since this is the leader of the refuge, the hero tries to understand why a superior monster exists there. And as it is so close to the entrance, the protagonist realizes that the monsters were attracted by the dragon's corpse, more precisely by the smell of rotting decomposition. As the enemy's level is 35, the armor system states that the battle is not recommended. However, knowing that escape won't be possible, the protagonist dodges the first attack, sweating cold with worry. Next, he defends against the second, but with great difficulty until he is thrown against a wall of force, hitting his back on the hard rocks. This is definitely the problem for Alka even now despite being able to level up. After all, if his enemy is this one, he will die as a weakling just the same. Alka screams in frustration because for a moment, he thought he had become strong. But the reality was that the boy was still just as pathetic as before. Somehow, the protagonist manages to escape through an alley and now tries to think of an escape route out of the cave. The nearest exit is blocked by the legendary goblin and his subordinates. So Alka starts to believe that the weak should act like the weak and simply hide until the storm passes. Even though this is his plan, a level 1 goblin appears in front of him, and so it charges like crazy to attack our hero. But since it is nothing like its leader, Alka simply grabs the monster by the head and smashes it against the wall. In this world, levels are absolute, so even monsters must understand the difference in power and flee when necessary. With one more victory, the owner of the armor receives a level increase going to level 7. For some reason, Alka had forgotten that he could now advance easily and perhaps defeat the leader. A few minutes ago, he was close to being killed, but now the hero understands that he has the chance to destroy his enemies to survive. Because of this, avoiding the main route, the hero defeats several smaller goblins along the way and continues doing the work of cleaning the dungeon at every opportunity he gets until the levels from the bodies start transferring to Alka. Then the hero's logic about the strongest winning due to the difference in levels becomes increasingly real. This is a world where the weak are oppressed just as Alka was in the recent past. After some time fighting in the dungeon, the protagonist manages to reach level 15. And at a certain moment while walking, the system recommended that Alka explore a cave just ahead. Because of this, the hero went there, and just as he entered, he found a pile of gold like no other. To justify this, Alka believes it must be all the treasure from adventurers who were defeated by the goblins. And since he is already there, the hero believes he should find something valuable to take. Suddenly, a chest catches his attention, and upon looking more closely, the contents are even more impressive, especially because it seems to be filled with health recovery potions. In this case, the hero decides to take them with him in case he needs them during a battle. And about this, the armor responds by saying it understands and confirms that storage has been expanded to hold them. So before Alka could even understand what it meant, a light appeared on the lower part of the armor, creating spaces for vials. And since it is something very useful, the protagonist thanks the system for its proactivity. Obviously, our hero would also like to take the gold with him. Something like that would only get in the way during battle. For now, Alka's top priority is to escape from there safely. Moreover, the hero has definitely become stronger, and if he gets out successfully, he can live a decent life just by selling monster materials. Because of that, he decides to leave, but suddenly some noises catch his attention. Since they sound very much like voices, the protagonist feels both scared and curious. But more concerned than anything else, he runs toward a box until he notices that behind it, there was a human girl captured by the monsters. And obviously, since she was crying desperately, the protagonist didn't think twice before rushing to her rescue, untying the ropes that held her. It was a relief for both of them that Alka noticed the noises, and having been saved, the girl from the village of Riel, named Mil, thanks him from the bottom of her heart. Not wanting to be rude, the girl asks if she can know the name of her savior. Then after thinking about it for a moment, the hero replies that his name is Alka, and he immediately clarifies that, yes, it is the name of the infamous corpse looter known in the city. Mil, in turn, had heard rumors that the protagonist was a terrible person. However, she's also happy to realize that he is nothing like the rumors. After all, in the end, it was he who saved her from suffering a cruel fate in that cave. So she truly doesn't think of Alka as a trash corpse scraper, but rather as her dear savior. All this time, Alka wanted to be an adventurer who helped people. Therefore, he calls the girl to follow him and tells her that he will take full responsibility for bringing her back to the village. Moreover, he makes it clear that there is nothing wrong because what was actually in Alka's heart was a little bit of happiness. On the way, the protagonist notices something different, so he asks Mil to stay behind the rocks for a moment. This is the feeling of being near goblins and looking closer. Alka realizes that it's not just one or two, but an entire horde. There might possibly be around 20 of them in total, but since they are all level 1 while the hero is at level 15, in this case, it doesn't matter how many there are now because Alka is determined to turn all of them into power for himself. Quickly, the monsters run toward the protagonist, but he finishes them all with his sword. And without any mercy, he rushes at the last ones remaining, sending them to the same fate. Thus, the levels are absorbed once again successfully. Thanks to the level drain ability, the protagonist's attacks are getting increasingly powerful. That's why after dodging the attack of one goblin, the others coming from behind weren't even able to touch Alka. Because with the jump, he managed to move several meters away and use the height as an advantage to attack them, absorbing their levels as well. Apparently, the protagonist even starts to enjoy the monster hunt, and the frightened expressions they make don't change anything when it comes to cutting them down. Even with several monsters defeated, the goblins keep trying to kill the protagonist at any cost. However, just as he did with their comrades, he charges forward and cuts them all down with his sword. Then after all that sea of destruction, the system notifies that a level increase has been detected, and now the power of the armor's wielder is at level 35. Mel gets very scared by all this and asks if they can leave now, but the protagonist replies that they cannot yet. After all, with the amount of blood spilled, others must have already been attracted. And among them, obviously, the strongest of them is coming. The same legendary goblin from before whom Alka will now face in a rematch. Standing in front of the monster, the protagonist comments that he already knew it would come, and the legendary goblin roars, displaying its imposing presence. Both the protagonist and the monster are currently at level 35, so he is no longer the same weakling who ran from the fight before. Without hesitation, the goblin boss shows that it will attack with full force. Then the protagonist replies, saying that if it thinks it can defeat him so easily, it is making a terrible mistake. Thus, the boy manages to land a slash on the monster's abdomen, making it fall to its knees. And while he is surrounded by the subordinates, he notices that there are about 10 of them in total. As long as the legendary goblin is still alive, the protagonist believes he cannot waste his time fighting these minions. So he shouts to the girl he saved to throw him a knife, and not knowing which one, Nil simply tosses an entire bundle into the air. Naturally, they fall from a holder in the direction of our hero. Before that, she apologizes a lot, but the protagonist comments that it's alright. After all, with his reaction time, he manages to catch 2 and fight the monsters with ease. In addition, he grabs others as they fall from the air and quickly throws them at the monsters. Several times, the protagonist's strategy continues to be collecting knives and throwing them. Then with several of them in hand, he comments that it must really be misfortune, but he thanks all those who tried to save the boss. After all, now the legendary goblin will suffer because of the level difference between them. Since our hero defeats all these small monsters and manages to ascend to level 45, already somewhat recovered from the previous attack, the monster screams and tries to attack Alka from behind. But now it is no longer possible to deal damage. At least that's what the hero thought, because by blocking carelessly, he was merely cut. He can't understand how this is happening, but is still being pressured. And apparently, the monster is not even slightly weakened from the last injury. From what he can see, the hero realizes that the legendary goblin is equipped with a bracelet that increases strength. This is an enchanted item from a distance. It is possible to see the energy emits. Normally, levels do not increase so easily, and that's why adventurers generally equip themselves with enchanted items to boost combat power as much as possible. However, the boy never expected the monster to also be using something like this. But since that is the case, the result will still be simple, because all he has to do is destroy the bracelet first. Without wasting time, our hero dodges an attack, and even though he doesn't believe it will be easy, he focuses. Because from this point on, he will no longer hold back but go all in. Furthermore, he will make sure that the power of the strongest will exterminate this monster. The weapons of both clash and attack, but the protagonist insists on applying pressure, which the monster feels as it has to brace itself against the ground. Even so, it manages to retaliate the sideways strike that sends the hero flying. Naturally, Alka feels a bit frustrated, but remembers the knives he used to defeat the smaller ones, and he quickly collects them back to use against the big guy, who defends himself with the giant cleaver. Even so, he decides to throw another, which makes the monster defend itself a second time. But now that it was distracted, the hero took the opportunity to get close to its face. And even though the goblin's reaction time was high, the hero managed to use the weapon as a boost to reach its flanks with one of those throwing knives. Thus, finally achieving the goal he had from the beginning, which was actually the bracelet. Therefore, at the moment the enhancement item falls broken to the ground, the hero faces the monster directly. And demonstrating his superiority, he declares that it's time to fish for the small fry. Regarding that legendary goblin, when the boy first entered the lair, he was weak and intimidated. But now the power difference between the two is completely reversed. Therefore, the protagonist comments that it's his turn to intimidate and asks if the monster is ready. Without any different reaction, the monster simply roars, so the protagonist charges forward at high speed and attacks the goblin's defenses, making the defense completely useless because now it is the monster who is thrown against the wall, creating several injuries. With that, the protagonist slowly approaches, asking what it feels like to be weak. And he attacks with several slashes, telling the monster not to hold a grudge because it's just trying to survive. Finally, the hero manages to disarm the goblin, and by defeating this enemy who was initially so strong, all those comments about the protagonist being a corpse looter will be thrown into the void along with his weak self. Even unarmed, the monster tries to attack with its fist, but the punch goes directly into the hero's sword, ending the situation in an instant. And since it was because of him that the boy became stronger, he even thanked it. From that body, several lights entered the protagonist's armor, and this time, the owner's power increase was confirmed to the incredible level 80. With nothing left to fear, Alka tells Mil that she can come out now, and even she's impressed by the hero's feat. After all, now he will be unbeatable in this place. But for some reason, the hero does not feel excited. Either way, he extracts the rare material from the legendary goblin, which is its tusk. Alka never thought he would see the day when he could obtain such a good piece. Mel simply asked him to let her store it along with the other things, because in that little bag were all the coins that could fit along with fragments of other rare items. Alka apologizes for making her carry so many materials, but the girl shows that she doesn't mind at all. Anyway, she asks what they will do now since they have already collected all the items. However, since the hero doesn't need to rush back to the village anymore, Alka thinks that if he leaves the goblins alone, they might kidnap another citizen. Therefore, the protagonist asks if the girl can come with him to a more distant place. And to explain himself, he says that he wants to make sure the monsters don't kidnap anyone else. Now for some time, the protagonist's goal was to hunt every goblin in this cave. Finally, after some time, they return to the village, and since Alka has already reached level 100, he even feels a bit concerned. But at level 100 it's a fact that he should be able to defeat most of the monsters there. Therefore, the hero can finally consider himself a true adventurer. Mil, in turn, asks what the boy means because she has never heard of an adventurer with 3 digits in this village. Therefore, Alka is no longer just one of the adventurers, but the best that exists there. Alka, for his part, seems not to believe it. But since he has fought only to survive, he never looked at the others. Absorbing the levels of defeated enemies was something that surprised Mila at first. But with that, she is sure he will become even stronger. So she also says that she will be cheering for the boy. Thus, the two talk peacefully until a group of adventurers appears, greeting the corpse scraper with hostility. And Alka knows very well Jarek, who is the one leading the group. Obviously, the white-haired one asks what that black armor is, and everyone starts laughing thinking that Alka decided to buy armor to compensate for not being able to level up. Anyway, Dre warns that using a fancy item won't make any difference. After all, level 1 can't compensate for the lack of power with something like that. However, just as he was speaking, the hero told the guy to shut up and instantly appeared with a knife, saying he was already tired. Therefore, with a terrifying expression, he politely asked once again. Faced with this threat, Yuru feels intimidated, but remembering who he is dealing with gets angry and delivers a kick that sends the protagonist backward. After all, to him, Alka was just a simple corpse looter who shouldn't speak so boldly. However, the moment he tried to attack more aggressively, the hero responded by putting him on the ground. And with his companions trembling in fear, the hero asked who would be next, and obviously, no one said a word. Kuri really can't understand what is happening since a level 20 should lose to a level 1. But about that, the hero comments that the guy doesn't even have a quarter of his power. Quickly, everyone opens the system to check the true level of the corpse scraper. Then the adventurers are shocked because even though it seems impossible, it is true. It was true that the protagonist was at level 100, and to everyone, he should also be considered a monster. Alka, for his part, finds it ironic that he is being called a monster after being called a trash picker. However, he warns that he only wants to be a normal adventurer, but his warning goes unheard. Because the moment they saw Alka's true power, the group quickly ran away. But that was something obvious to Milt since the hero was no longer the same person as before. That's why with the smile, she asks him to have more confidence in himself. And soon, she calls the boy to share this news with all the people in the city. A little while later at the material shop, the old man asks aggressively what the boy wants. So as always, the protagonist says he wants to sell. But since he's considered a corpse looter, the old man says it doesn't matter how well it's presented because the material is trash. However, about that, our hero had his trump card because he asked if what he brought was also trash. And upon showing it, even that rude vendor was surprised because it was a legendary goblin tusk. Since this is a rare material, the vendor asks where the boy got it, and he replies that he defeated the monster, but the old man doesn't believe it. In this case, Alpha calls Mil, who dumps everything they got from the last expedition onto the table. And faced with that, the hero asks if the old man is going to buy or not. After all, now he doesn't mind going to sell somewhere else. Obviously, even being rude, the old man recognizes quality items and agrees to buy everything. Then with a fake smile, the hero asks him to pay a fair price. Later, at the city food market, the protagonist goes to the baker stall. And because he was someone who always treated him well, he hands over a bag full of gold, leaving the old man completely confused. Alcott explains that he finally managed to defeat a strong monster and that he's very happy he didn't give up. So the old man doesn't think twice before hugging the boy, also saying that he is very happy that he didn't give up. Suddenly, a very loud commotion is heard at the entrance of the village, so the hero says he will finish the conversation later. Right at the city gates, a group of white werewolves is destroying everything, and among them, one prepares to make a girl his afternoon snack. But at the most critical moment, the protagonist appears saving the girl who luckily ends up safe. Alka, for his part, finds the monster's behavior in front of him very strange. But anyway, he says that if the werewolves are trying to attack the village, they arrived a day late. After all, as long as the hero is there, none of them will get past the gates. These monsters are all level 8 werewolves and normally would have been killed before even getting close to the village. But Sivjurid and the others who are assigned to deal with them ran away. The protagonist now understands the situation, and he also understands that this now makes him responsible to act. Quickly, one of the werewolves tries to attack the boy, but the protagonist dodges because with the power he has now, he can take down as many as he wants. The worrying part, however, is that not all of them are focusing on him, but rather on the citizens whom the boy isn't able to protect all at once. And, obviously, if he doesn't do something about it, the innocent population will be killed. One of the civilians becomes desperate because he is just one step away from being eaten alive. But at this moment, the protagonist appears, shielding him with his own body and finishing off the beast. Then the boy asks if the man is hurt, but after saying yes, the citizen realizes that it's the corpse who's there. However, instead of getting angry, a hero simply goes on to handle the situation, which is more important. Deep down, he knows is still the corpse scraper that everyone hates, but that is definitely no reason to abandon others. Naturally, while the protagonist does his job, everyone notices that Alka is saving the population and finally advancing toward the last monster. After finishing it, the hero knows everything will be over. So with just one strike, he finishes the last of the opponents. And thus, with the power-absorbing ability, the armor owner's level rises all the way to 172. However, the fact that it only increased by 72 is concerning for Hero since he counted 10 werewolves. Following this logic, if he had finished all of them, his level should have gone up by 80. Therefore, this means there is still one more hiding somewhere. From the top of house, the last of the monster is ready to attack a little girl. So the moment Alka realizes this, the monster simply ignores him, jumping on top of its target. Alka panics because even after increasing his level so much, he still might not be able to save a life. And that's what is about to happen when the girl looks up and sees the werewolf just a few meters from her. Alka, for his part, refuses to accept this and thinks that maybe he can make it if he throws his sword, but he only has one chance. Even so, he will make this the best throw possible because he has to guarantee that he hits the target. The monster charges at high speed toward the girl, and the protagonist's sword approaches the werewolf's body until Alka manages to hit the beast and send it flying away from the girl with the impact. This way, the little girl also realizes that she is in front of the corpse scraper. But since he confirms that he saved her, the girl throws away all prejudice to thank him, even making our hero happy for helping her. However, now the pleasant atmosphere fades because with the end of the invasion, several citizens start to approach. And among them, one in particular says he needs to have a conversation with Alka. At that very moment, the protagonist thinks it's going to be a headache dealing with citizens who are upset about being saved by him. So just as another person approaches to speak as well, the hero says he's going to leave since he's not welcome there. However, unexpectedly, these people ask him to wait a moment, and what they came to say to him was simply thank you, since thanks to him, everyone there was safe. The boy from earlier assumed the protagonist thought he was being dramatic, but since Alta put his own body at risk for him, he says that he appreciated it, which surprises the protagonist. In addition, the mother of that little girl also approaches, and since her daughter was rescued, she lowers her head to thank him in submission. In this case, the protagonist becomes very embarrassed and asks the mother to stand up. Then he explains that the only reason that led him to do this was his desire to save everyone. The hero understands that his past as a corpse looter will not disappear. However, now that he has the power to protect others, Alka states that he will become an adventurer who helps people. Moreover, the boy smiles, saying that it will be good if they keep an eye on him because for now, that was all he asks. That day, the protagonist was nothing more than a simple corpse scraper. But in the end, he became the adventurer who saved the village. The next day, everyone walks normally in that small town, and upon finding our protagonist, Mel happily goes to him. Because of that, Alka welcomes her, but the girl finds it strange that the boy is not wearing armor. But about that, the hero simply snaps his fingers because he has just discovered that he can put it on and take it off instantly, and the girl finds it quite amazing. Thanks to this armor, the protagonist states that he will become a great adventurer, so he was also very lucky to have found it in the goblin's nest. Even so, he still wonders why there was a dead dragon in that place, although for now, it is not something that matters. Elsewhere, someone shouts for them to run quickly. The place where they are is the goblin's nest near the body of the dragon that was being talked about. Chiri yells for everyone to get away from that thing right now, and his teammates run as fast as they can. However, in an instant, a puddle of blood makes the fate of the two very clear. Desperate to know what is happening, the leader of the group shouts, asking the identity of the being in front of him. However, J&I stares at him without revealing anything and soon begins to generate a powerful electric current. Then the adventurer laughs in despair, understanding that this will also be his end. And the moment the energy beam is ready, this mysterious monster fires it with full force without any mercy, which even makes our hero hear it from afar and wonder if he's imagining things. Some time ago, Jirig's group was chasing a one-eyed troll. And since the monster was already injured, the leader ordered his companions not to let it escape. Obviously, realizing it was a good opportunity, the two agreed. At a certain point in the chase, the monster ran into the goblin's cave. Then Jurek starts commenting that because they abandoned the mission to stop the werewolves, they received a very high fine. And that is precisely why they cannot let such a profitable prey get away. As the monster drags itself inside, trembling with exhaustion, it suddenly smells something that attracts it to the center of the cave. And upon arriving there, it was drawn by the smell of the dragon's decomposing body. But for some reason, this was not a foul smell to it like it was to others, but rather a delicious one. Together with his group shortly after, Juri comments that it must be just ahead until suddenly he is surprised by something. The smell of the dragon's decomposition is something that almost makes everyone there vomit. But something else catches the attention of the white-haired man more than that. After all, in the center of the dragon's body is the troll they were chasing, devouring all the flesh like an animal. And the worst part is that the second man in the group notices that something is strange. After all, suddenly something comes out from inside the monster, making Jirid realize that the situation will not be good at all. While chasing that sound from before, the protagonist realizes that he was indeed right and that it was not just his imagination, because there really is a strange sensation in the air. And this entire sensation seems to be coming precisely from this place. At this moment, our hero hears another noise even louder than the last, which makes him become very serious. Inside the cave, the smell of rot only gets worse, and further ahead, he finds the dragon's body. However, upon arriving at the place where he got the armor, the scene is of a transformed troll exterminating Jarek's group. And right after noticing a new guest, it sent away the companion of the white-haired boy to focus entirely on the protagonist's appearance. Even Alka is startled by the presence of the monster because it is different from anything he has ever faced. Even so, since he is at level 180 now, he believes there is no way he can lose. So before making any move, he will defeat it with a single precise attack. However, the armor warns that due to the level difference with the enemy monsters, the battle is strongly discouraged, making Alka stop for a moment, which is enough for the monster to see an opening and attack. At this moment, all the armor recommends is an immediate dodge, but the protagonist had already taken a very powerful hit, which threw him to the ground, making him fall face down with many injuries. To be sure of the enemy he is facing, the protagonist decides to check the monster status. And the moment he did that, the system's prediction proved to be true because this was a fallen variant of level 200. Quickly, the armor warns that a strong energy condensation has been detected coming from the troll's head. Therefore, an immediate dodge is recommended, but our hero cannot move. Little by little, the messages are repeated several times as the monster's attack gets closer to being launched. Then Alpa tries to move using all his strength, because if he does nothing at this moment, he will definitely be the next to be killed by this abomination. The estimated time before the attack is 10 seconds, and since the boy cannot move, he ends up thinking about the worst possibility. Even so, he struggles anew using his sword as support, and with almost 1 second left, Alka manages to almost stand up. Either way, the monster does not wait for him to get up to fire its energy attack. Because of that, the protagonist is thrown against the wall, and the injuries he suffers practically leave him unconscious. Luckily for him, after seeing the boy defeated on the ground, the monster decides to leave. Then sometime later, Alka manages to recover, questioning what the hell happened. The armor warns that it is possible that the owner was considered deceased, so Alka is very grateful to fate. Obviously, it's a fact that he has severe damage to his body, so the use of potions is strongly recommended. Remembering the potions he took from the goblins, the boy drinks the first one, and since the effect already allows him to move, Alka comments that he should thank them. Anyway, now he needs to chase the monster as quickly as possible since he is sure that its next target is Riel village. However, before going, a voice calling him a corpse scavenger reaches his ears, and looking more closely, it is Jurek, who even in an extremely bad condition, is still alive. Without any shame, the boy demands the recovery potions. After all, he believes that something like this won't make any difference to trash like him. Proving to be even worse than expected, the boy warns that he will run away as soon as he drinks them using the villager's bait. Therefore, once again, even more irritated than before, he shouts to get the potions quickly. Jeremy coughs up blood and insists because his entire body is injured and his mind is going insane. Unexpectedly, the boy considers doing this, but first asks the Abyss armor if it will make any difference. The system informs that the injuries are fatal and that inevitably the boy will die after a few more minutes of intense pain. In this case, upon understanding, the hero asks for one more thing before anything else. What he wants to know is whether the level drain can be used to absorb levels from a human being. And as the system informs that, yes, it can, Alka empathetically says that the boy can no longer be saved. And deep down, he already knew that, but just wanted to escape from this pain by creating a comfortable illusion. Alka, in turn, comments that there is one thing he can do to free him from this pain. And Jurig also already knows what he wants to do, so he simply asks to be killed right away without any regret. At this moment, Alka admits that he never liked the guy, but he also finds it sad to have to say goodbye like this. Either way, he really does what he made clear he was going to do, and by absorbing Jarik's powers, our hero reaches level 200. Sometime later, the monster approaches through the forest until it manages to spot the beginning of the village. Obviously, he's guided by the instinct that there are humans there, but it is at this moment that the protagonist encounters the beast, and he appears delivering a slash to its arm that causes intense pain. Wasting no time, our hero advances at his maximum speed, and without wanting to offend, states that he can no longer keep losing to it. Because of that, he attacks again, but now the monster defends itself cleverly. Either way, with his sword pointed at the beast, Alka warns that next time, the troll should make sure to eliminate his enemy. After all, since he didn't do it now, the level of the two is equivalent, and without wanting to drag it out any longer, Alka calls him to fight right away. First of all, our hero also advises him to stay alert. After all, even though he didn't like Jarive, he still had to kill someone he knew with his own hands, so he has never been this angry in his life. Wasting no time, the monster moves in for the first attack, and confident that it will win, tries to strike from below. However, a hero uses the monster's shoulder as support to climb to a higher position, and thus lands a hit on the monster's back before it can defend itself. Even though his strategy was successful, the wing is more resistant than expected. Suddenly, the monster starts to concentrate energy around its eye, so now the hero wouldn't let it do that again. But demonstrating enormous intelligence, this was just a feat by the beast, which used the hero's voluntary approach to land a kick. And taking advantage of the moment when he was most defenseless, the monster used an entire tree as a weapon to strike the protagonist, causing him to be thrown very far, breaking several trees along the way until he ended up pinned against a rock wall. Even though the level differences disappeared, they are still evenly matched, which means the boy has no advantage. Furthermore, the monster has also been using feints the entire time, but now Alka takes another potion, which is his biggest advantage. This way, he becomes furious, saying that it's not over yet, and charges toward the monster's energy beam that is starting to be prepared. Unfortunately, upon getting close, the system warns that this is something that cannot be stopped. So changing strategies, the protagonist dodges at the last second and charges with his sword with all his strength. Then even though the troll tried to use its hard wings as a shield, Alka's enraged strike was enough to practically cut both of them in half. With the monster completely distracted by the damage caused, the hero realizes that he finally made some progress. However, suddenly, the beast's attention turns to somewhere other than the hero, and as the reflection of the village becomes clear in the troll's eye, our hero becomes very worried, but the monster simply puts strength into its legs and launches into the air toward the place with the highest concentration of humans. Since it happened very quickly, the protagonist couldn't react instantly. But since the monster's objective was clearly to attack the village, the boy hurried as fast as he could, understanding that he needed to chase it before an even greater disaster could happen. In an instant, the silhouette of the monster can be seen above the citizens of the entire village. And before they could even understand what it was, an explosion happened, leaving everyone scared. And from that explosion emerged the fallen variant, which roared in a demonstration of dominance. Alka continues the pursuit, but gets very scared when he realizes that it has already entered the village. Following its nature, the monster starts destroying everything it sees in front of it. All the citizens try to run for their lives, begging for help, and once again, the troll charges its energy beam, which makes the protagonist think this must be a joke. Unfortunately, the inevitable happens and the energy beam passes, destroying several houses in an instant. Then the protagonist approaches from a rooftop and charges toward the monster with indescribable rage. The beast defends itself using its arm to protect its eye and once again tries to ignore its opponent. However, hero wouldn't let something like that happen, so he jumps over, blocking the escape route, attacking the fallen variant's defenses again. For a few seconds, the two struggle between attack and defense, but the protagonist dodges. Still, he prepares another strike, warning that it's not over because he needs to protect the village at all costs. Using all the power it has, the troll charges energy in its eye and fires that energy beam once again with even more speed. This way, giving no chance for defense, it also grabs the protagonist in the air, punching him from above downward, causing Alka to crash into the village ground with an explosion. Thus, the monster is finally free to start running again, but the hero refuses to be defeated like this. Since he is the only adventurer with a high enough level to fight the monster, he forces himself to stand. And with a serious expression, he commits to dealing with this problem once and for all. Sometime later, that baker had the bad luck encountering the variant, but is not scared by its presence, even though the monster tries to intimidate him with roars. In the end, since this is a small village, even if he runs, the old man knows he will be caught. Therefore, he prefers to just wait there until some hero arrives to save him. And since he was sure of that, his faith did not disappoint him because the protagonist managed to arrive before a disaster happened. With a playful smile, Alka comments that he is way too clumsy to be that so-called hero. However, since the boy came to his rescue, that is exactly what matters. Still, Alka makes it clear that he doesn't know if he can defeat the monster. Although, it's a fact that now both are at the same level. In this case, the baker goes to a box and asks the boy not to be so pessimistic. Then he throws a piece of bread to the boy saying it's a gift. And looking closer, it's clear that this is the last piece of bread from when the boy was still a corpse scavenger. The old man comments that compared to those days, this situation certainly isn't that bad. Then the boy eats it and makes it clear that the bread is terrible. But since this really was a motivation, it filled him with courage. The hero points his sword at the monster, asking it to get ready because they will continue the fight immediately. This time, it is our hero who approaches first and using a feat. He pretends he will focus on the eye to create an opening at the arm. However, the monster manages to grab the hero with its other hand to his surprise. And without thinking twice, the beast throws the boy far away, sending him over the houses until he lands on the ground. In this case, Alka becomes desperate, trying to figure out how he can hurt it. But then he hears a noise from a frightened person, and turning around, realizes there's a small child nearby. Alka immediately shouts for the little one to run away as fast as possible. However, since the child is having a panic attack, he can't move. And to make the situation worse, instinctively, the monster focuses its attention on the weakest human. In just a second, it jumps toward the child and with an intimidating roar, prepares an attack that approaches in a terrifying way. However, at the last second, the protagonist appears taking the attack head-on for the child, who, although scared, manages to escape the impact. Unfortunately, that's not the case for the protagonist since even his defense isn't enough. Once again, Alka begs the child to run, now with even more sincerity since he can't continue. Thus, while the monster prepares the final blow, the hero asks the child to show a little courage. And even though his whole body is trembling, the boy stands up, saying that he will try and runs with all his strength without looking back, leaving the protagonist alone with the monster, who now feels satisfied. The system warns that the enemy has completed charging its energy, so an immediate retreat from the area is recommended. But the hero apologizes to the Abyss armor because this time, you won't be able to do what's recommended. Without any delay, the laser fires from the monster's eye and hits the protagonist, piercing houses and everything in its path. In the end, the hero remained intact since he defended himself with his sword, but that power was overwhelming. Even though they are at the same level, the difference in skill is way too big. And because of the heavy damage, the hero decides to take a potion. But, unfortunately, he realizes that he dropped it when he was thrown against the houses. In this case, obviously, he needs to go after it. But gradually, the hero's strength starts to fade until the boy finds himself in an abyss realizing that he failed to protect the village. Even so, something inside him still believes in the hope of recovering and continuing to fight. Therefore, Alka desperately begs in his mind for someone to offer help. And as a result of his prayers, suddenly the last potion is poured into his mouth. Then when the boy wakes up, he notices the presence of a girl right in front of him. Because of that, the protagonist quickly gets up asking who this person is. And without hiding anything, the girl introduces herself as Layla, who's just a girl from the village that wants to protect the place where she was raised and that she loves so much. Cutting off the pleasant conversation between the two, a terrifying noise from the monster makes the hero realize that he needs to get back to the fight quickly. But before that, she comments that she has been watching the hero fighting to protect the village for some time, and knowing that he still cares about this place is something that makes her very happy. However, she extends her hand saying that for now, they should run away together. Obviously, the hero refuses that possibility since he is the only one there who can defeat the monster. However, in response, the girl says that there is a reason to run because if he is defeated there, she is sure that there will be no one left to be saved throughout the entire village. Even with the destruction happening, Layla states that as long as the hero's wound is not healed, he should avoid fighting that monster. And even though he doesn't want to accept it, Alpha understands that she is right and that it will take some time before he can fight with full strength. Suddenly, from high up in the sky, the monster they were talking about appears to confront the two head-on. Then quickly, the girl extends her hand to the protagonist who, seeing no other option, decides to retreat with her to a safe position until he's fully recovered. During the escape, they turn into an alley, and by the way, the hero asks how she knows his name. Then still running, the girl explains that Alka is quite famous in this place. He asks if it's for being that corpse scavenger, and indeed, that is one of the reasons. However, Layla makes it clear that another reason for knowing him is because she considers him a hero. Layla explains that she was there the day the werewolves attacked the village, and that is precisely why she believes in the protagonist's ability. So in case the situation is in the hero's hands, she is sure he will solve it. Faced with that hopeful look from the girl, Alka raises his fist and decides to make a promise that he will save the village, which was exactly what Lilo wanted to hear. Suddenly, another strange sound catches their attention because it's a human scream. When they go to the place, a bandit was kidnapping a girl and forcefully taking her out of the city. In addition, the same man was feeling grateful to the monster since there was no one to stop them from doing whatever they wanted openly, making this a great opportunity to make money. Obviously, the protagonist watches this whole scene with disgust at the opportunists taking advantage to get what they want. Layla has the same reaction, but suddenly something surprises her. And right when the hero tries to talk to her, he also realizes that even though they were hiding, a man saw her from behind and captured her, turning the girl who had just been saved by our hero into a hostage of the bandits. With a very serious tone, the bald man explains that if the boy wants the girl safe, he must follow his orders. The first one is to go near the carriage right ahead, which the hero accepts. When he gets kicked over there, the leader of the bandits gets confused about this situation. After all, he had already said that they didn't meet a man, but he soon realized that there was also a pretty girl being held. And upon looking more closely at every part of her body, he smiled maliciously because he knew she would definitely be worth a lot of money. Faced with that disgusting attitude, the protagonist asks whether the leader has no conscience at times like this. But about that, the bandit doesn't even think twice before saying he doesn't. The fact is that they came there to loot this village in the first place. Therefore, the bandit makes it clear that the hero is already lucky that they weren't the ones who had to kill the citizens, which obviously makes the protagonist furious, wanting to finish off this trash as soon as possible. The leader in turn notices this angry expression and gets closer, asking if he is an adventurer. Then he whispers in Alka's ear that it must be shameful for him, because now it doesn't matter how powerful he is since he can't do anything. Either way, everyone gets ready to leave, and the leader asks the bald guy to take good care of the girl. After all, it will be a problem if the adventurer tries to intervene in any way. Alder heard this whole conversation knowing that he only needed one moment of carelessness. Therefore, he waited for an opportunity to save her, until suddenly, a certain person with a knife appeared behind the kidnapper. Quickly, the bandit warns his partner to dodge, and then it is revealed that the person is actually Mel. Therefore, since the bald guy was warm in advance, he managed to dodge easily without letting go of the hostage, causing the girl to fall face down on the ground. The bald guy comments that the girl can't beat him and that she should know the difference in their strength. However, unexpectedly, she says that it's okay, leaving the kidnapper confused. That's because right behind him, there is already another person to take care of this. In just an instant, Alka approaches, and this time before the big guy can react, he receives a punch with all the power of the adventurer. This way, not only is the bald guy defeated, but Leela is also free to falling directly into the arms of the protagonist. Faced with this, the leader of the bandits tells his subordinates to approach quickly and yells at them to kill the hero before he interferes any further, so they all gather around the boy. First of all, the bandit asks Alka if he's sure about this action because he won't hold back. And since the boy doesn't answer, the gunslinger interprets it as if our hero is feeling afraid. With nothing else to say, while Alka remains unresponsive, the bandits jump on him to finish him off. Then the protagonist remembered what the bald guy had said earlier before being defeated. He made it clear that understanding the difference in power was essential to knowing whether it was worth getting into a fight. Therefore, it was ironic that the bandit leader didn't follow this now since he was picking a fight with someone he couldn't defeat. Naturally, after that statement came in mass-level absorption by the protagonist. And when only the leader was left among the bandits, he became desperate because this was not the speed of a normal adventurer. Then the protagonist made sure to confirm, especially since he was already at level 200. In this case, in a last instinct to fight, the bandit draws his sword and charges aggressively. But, obviously, the protagonist finishes him off with just one strike of his sword. Thus, once again, the powers are absorbed, and now the owner of the armor reaches level 250, which also leads the system to notify that the maximum level for a human being has been reached. After defeating the bandit, the protagonist thinks about what he just heard. Then he asks if that means level 250 is the highest he can reach, and the system confirms. To begin with, the hero had never heard of an adventurer with such high levels, but he also didn't think there could be a limit. Either way, now that everything is resolved, Leela jumps on her savior, thanking him for saving her. But the hero makes a point of not taking credit, because to him, it's the least he could do after the potion earlier. Since if he hadn't taken that in time, he certainly wouldn't be alive anymore. Still, whatever the reason, Leela remains happy because to her, Alka is her hero. Faced with that attention and with all the bandits' bodies on the ground, Alka doesn't accept that title because he still thinks he's immature. If he had left the bandits alive, they would have attacked another village, so Alka stated he used the sword because he couldn't find a better solution. But in response to that, Leela comments that he isn't wrong. And when asked what she means, she repeats it with more intensity. For her, it is only because of the protagonist's use of the sword that everyone is still alive. Therefore, she asks him to have more pride in himself, and with an affectionate expression, she says she won't let Alka belittle himself. Then and after hearing everything, the protagonist thanks her, saying it's a relief to know that, which finally restores his confidence. At that moment, Mill appears saying that she's already evacuated all the people who were trapped. So she receives a pat as a reward for her good work, which makes her very happy. She was really happy to be able to help because leaving everything to Alka while just watching wasn't something she could do. Therefore, now she calls the hero and asks to fight alongside him until the end. But now that he has already eliminated the bandits, the protagonist says it won't be necessary to her surprise. A few seconds later, while the monster continued destroying everything, the protagonist asked them to get as far away as possible. Especially since now at level 250, the system warns that the bearer can easily dominate the enemy monster. And after strengthening himself so much, the protagonist is now ready to return to the battle. Without even needing to run to the place, the monster they were talking about appears, falling from the sky. And from atop the walls, just its arrival is enough to raise a powerful gust of wind, which, although it affects the girls, doesn't affect the protagonist. Either way, he says he's ready and then asks once again for the two of them to run because he's going to end this now. So the girls accept and run away holding hands at the same time. Now alone with the monster, the protagonist apologizes for running away from it earlier, but says he won't run anymore because it's time to finish this duel. The Varian roars to impose its dominance, but now the protagonist doesn't even move a finger out of place. He charges forward instead. In the beginning, he couldn't even wield a sword because of his poor conditions. Then he managed to hold a real one in a very good condition and eventually started using it to protect the people around him. Now in this moment, the protagonist remembers the fight against the wolves and also remembers when he had to kill Jirik, as well as the reaction of all the people in the village who are waiting to be saved while fighting for their own lives. Therefore, Alka says that it's time to fulfill everyone's wishes by continuing to wield this sword. With an unmatched aura, the protagonist comments that the monster should feel honored now that it has reached the limit of its growth. After all, the variant will be the first opponent to experience the strength of humanity in its own body. Warring in rage is always monster clenches its fists and charges to finish off the adventurer once and for all. However, now it has easily repelled the moment it tries to attack. Alpha calmly states that this kind of attack won't work anymore and punches the opponent straight in the chest. In addition, while the beast is thrown far away, he positions himself on top of it to follow with another strike, this time with gravity on his side. Naturally, the protagonist's display of strength causes a huge cloud of dust to rise. And with that, the monster gathers energy around its eye to use its final resort. This time, the variant bets everything on the power of its light beam. Then the system detects an energy convergence several times greater than the previous ones. But instead of running away, the hero says he'll be standing still waiting for the enemy to give up. Being very close to the fallen variant, the monster fires its most powerful energy beam, and Alka prepares to take that power head-on. Because for him, it doesn't matter how much the beast tries, and that becomes clear when a barrier that defends him from the attack is created. Since with the difference of 50 levels, Alka knows there's no longer any chance of being defeated. The midst of a destroyed setting that was once a peaceful village, the two powerful beings face each other. And following its beastly nature, the variant tries to impose itself by roaring as always. But upon observing the protagonist's aura, something changes because it seems afraid. At first, the monster used its strongest power to devastate the people of this village, but now it's about to be subdued by an even more intense power, which for our hero who's already lived through many experiences like this, obviously, is nothing unusual in a world like this. After flying in the blink of an eye to the front of the monster, Alpha chases it without hiding. Then the monster responds by preparing a punch to intercept the boy, but Alpha not only dodges but also hits the variant's head, making it fall to the ground stunned. Even on the ground, it tries to keep fighting by preparing a quick laser attack and firing it at our hero. But Alpha faces this already with a bit of boredom at the beast, still insisting on this. Since that's the case, our hero says he's going to teach it what true despair is. Once again, the protagonist takes the attack head-on, and this time doesn't even bother using much effort. Anyway, the monster keeps releasing its power continuously until it finally gets tired and stops the firepower. Even a little bit of smoke starts coming out of its eyes. However, the expression of surprise is what stands out the most because when the dust settles, the variant realizes that its opponent is completely fine. And that was the protagonist's strategy to make the difference between the two very clear. Understanding the meaning of that, the monster seems disappointed, but also enraged. It screams without caring about the protagonist's strength and determined to fight once again, tries to attack in any way possible. The monster mixes physical attacks with quick energy releases from its eyes. However, the protagonist dodges the attacks and even while in the air, manages to both evade the eye power and counterattack. In addition, with no more obstacles, it's now Alka's turn to attack, so the beast tries to defend itself with its arm as usual. But that was its worst mistake because the hero's blade went straight through, cutting off one of the most important parts of the beast. Alka backs off, and with little patience to continue, tells the monster to kneel so they can settle this quickly. Obviously, this hurts the variant's pride, so it starts firing energy beams everywhere. But none of that is effective, and with a horizontal slash, the hero makes the beast succumb to the overwhelming force of his power. When she falls to her knees, Alka immediately jumps over her. Therefore, since she hurt the people of this village a lot, our hero drives the sword right into the middle of the monster's eye. And so that beast that not long ago seemed practically invincible was defeated. With the hero's new victory, the system tries to absorb the levels, but fails since the owner has reached the level cap. Thus, the system still finds a way by unlocking new features of the Abyss armor, making it possible to use level conversion to reach an even greater potential. The next day, after the victory over the fallen variant, people work hard to rebuild the city. This can be seen when one of them asks for some wood from the top of a roof. In response, a helper says he'll bring it immediately, but suddenly trips over a rock on the ground, making a fall inevitable. That is if the protagonist hadn't appeared from behind to save the boy from this problem. Therefore, the citizen looks at his savior with a bit of surprise, but quickly thanks the village hero for the help. A little less busy a few minutes later, the protagonist decides to ask what exactly this level conversion mentioned earlier is. Then the system informs him that the owner can acquire new epic skills in exchange for his level. And about that, it is said that epic skills are valuable techniques with a variety of effects, such as increasing movement speed or fire resistance, which are examples of great resources for adventurers. Normally, these skills can be acquired during an early period while the person levels up. However, since our hero couldn't gain experience, he didn't obtain any of these skills. Therefore, even though he has already reached his maximum level, he didn't get any epic skills in return. But despite the opportunity being tempting, Alka focuses more on trying to understand what the hell this Evi's armor is. Regarding the first recommended skill, the system suggests one that can make the boy advance beyond human limits. However, the cost for this is 240 levels. There's basically everything he has achieved so far. Currently, the protagonist is at level 250, so losing everything is something that hurts quite a bit. But thinking about the future, this ability to advance beyond will be something essential. Because of this, the hero asks to receive this skill right away, and the system understands placing it in activation order through the phrase request the skill. Without thinking twice, the hero requests the level increase beyond human limits. Thus, the conversion starts to be executed, making our hero shiver as part of his power is drained. All the lights of the experience fading away are so flashy that citizens can see it from afar. And without stopping, from an energy core in the heart of our hero, all of that keeps flowing out. Until finally, with an even more intense light, the system announces that the payment has been received and that the skill has been granted to the owner. In this way, Alka feels proud of how far he has come as a former corpse looter. However, an even stranger feeling remains because the hero realizes it's as if his own power has been expanded. Then the system informs him that the owner has surpassed the maximum level of humanity, which means he has become a transcendent being. In this case, Alka can't help but smile at his new achievement. And while reflecting and looking at the sky, he thinks once again how much things have changed. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the village, an irritated man comments that he came back because he thought it was time. All this fury was because our hero had already defeated the beast he was expecting to face. Therefore, his coming would be a waste of time, but even so, this adventurer became curious to know who there would be strong enough to defeat that monster. Back to the hero, unexpectedly, since the maximum level was surpassed, the 200 that were pending will be transferred to the wearer of the armor. And the protagonist remembers this because when he defeated that monster, he wasn't able to drain its experience. Anyway, now Alka is at level 210, which even though it decreased because of the conversion, is still quite powerful. With this, Alka thinks that maybe he should obtain more epic skills that cost less since they are very valuable. And if he manages to get many of them, he could become the one and only strongest adventurer in the world. In this case, the boy thinks that he has to make a plan for the future. But suddenly, with quick steps, Layla appears happy to see the hero and jumps toward him, leaving him embarrassed. With a cute expression, the girl comments that she was looking for him since after destroying the monster. Life has become chaos. In this case, the hero apologizes and explains that the day before, he was helping to put out the fires. However, Mill approaches saying that the girl was really worried about him, which was obviously also the case for her. Our hero comments that he is very happy that both of them are okay, but Layla insists on giving the boy credit for that. In the end, she's as grateful as she is embarrassed, and to show it, the girl expresses her affection by kissing the protagonist on the cheek, which although simple leaves her unable to look Alka in the eyes. For a moment after that kiss, the two look at each other with an expression that says a lot. Then Layla gathers her courage and closes her eyes to reveal that she loves the protagonist, but she also runs away extremely embarrassed. Alka is definitely the one who is most shocked. Mill, on the other hand, takes the situation more lightly, and even the baker appears to praise his godson's achievement. Then Alka, feeling both irritated and embarrassed, shouts loudly for the two of them to get out of there. In the end, the protagonist couldn't even imagine that someone could have feelings for him because of his past. He wondered what he should do now. Then the system notified him that showing his masculinity was the recommended action, leaving Alka even more embarrassed. A few days later, on the road leading to the entrance of Raikou village, a group of adventurers approaches. The leader realizes that this is the place they were sent to, but since it seems abandoned, he believes they might have arrived too late. A colleague, in turn, comments that possibly another monster attacked the region. After all, if a flaming dragon had made an appearance there, the entire village would have already disappeared. In any case, the one with green hair believes they should go there to ask what happened, because they must do everything possible to prevent further disasters caused by the flaming dragon. Thus, he orders everyone to keep following him, and without refusing, the adventurers march alongside the leader, Yin. Meanwhile, in the cave region where all the events took place, going deeper into the goblin-dominated area, an intense noise is heard. And the reason for this is the appearance of a very powerful black dragon. At this same moment in another place, the protagonist is testing his knife thrown against some herbivorous dinosaurs passing by, hitting them and defeating them very quickly despite being a large group. Alka is now back at level 1 and has gained new epic skills in these past few days. One of them is the permanent poison effect, which he just tested on the dinosaurs. The cost, however, was high because it took 200 levels from the hero. However, simply hitting an enemy with a poison-coated knife is enough to defeat small enemies. Another skill was increasing knife accuracy. So with these two, even if he loses levels due to conversion, he can raise his power without having to fight stronger opponents one-on-one. The downside is that it takes a few hours for the poison to drain the monster's health. But with this, he could easily raise his level even as a beginner. Suddenly, a light begins to approach, indicating that apparently some monster has died. Then upon absorbing the level, the armor jumps from the 1st to the 41st. In this case, Alka doesn't stop there and decides to increase the poison effect, causing it to return to the 1st again. In any case, this can help him raise his powers more quickly. At this moment, the protagonist is definitely tired. Since he has already pierced around 20 monsters out there, in a few hours, he will be back at level 200. In this case, since he has achieved his goal, Alka simply decides to return to the village. Upon arriving there, the boy comes across all that commotion and immediately asks if something happened. Then the level 120 adventurer named Ayan asks if the hero is from the same profession as them. And in case he is, he opens the system hoping it could be helpful, but soon realizes the level is a bit low. Since the protagonist sacrifices powers for skills, everyone judges without knowing. But Alpha is already quite familiar with this feeling of humiliation. To try to ease the tension, and comments that the boy must have just started in the adventuring world. However, he is surprised when the hero reveals that he has been at this for years. The white-haired colleague, in turn, joins the conversation joking with the boy, believing it to be a joke. But upon looking at Alka's serious face, even he understands the meaning of it. Faced with this, the man recalls that he heard rumors about such an adventurer famous for being the weakest of the weak who called himself a corpse scraper. Alka, in turn, does not deny being the person they are talking about, but asks what they are going to do about it, creating a terrifying sense of intimidation. Ain, now wanting to start a fight, informs that they are in charge of a subjugation request from the guild. It is said that recently they spotted a certain unusual monster around this area. And when asked about it, he confirms that it is a black dragon called the Flaming Dragon, which is above level 150. That's why he mourns that it will take more than just a few adventurers to defeat it. To solve the situation, everyone there formed a team with users of epic skills to defeat it. Therefore, the leader asked the boy to stay calm. And since they haven't introduced themselves, the two exchange names with a handshake. Alka thinks that if the monster is really level 150, he could certainly defeat it alone. However, since it's a black dragon, he wonders if it might be related to the body in the goblin cave. Suddenly, an adventurer from the group comes running, calling for the leader. And as soon as he catches his breath, he desperately informs that the escort group managed to find the flaming dragon they were looking for. The situation of this group, in turn, is even more desperate because with so few people, ordinary adventurers are learning firsthand how terrifying a flaming black dragon can be. Back to the messenger's report, it is said that the reconnaissance group is currently leading the dragon toward the prairie. Ein Man announces that they will head there right away and informing everyone. The leader calls the adventurers to prepare for battle, which makes the warriors cheer with the command. From what Alpha can observe, the level of the adventurers in this subjugation team ranges from 80 to 120. But even though it's an elite group with epic skills against the level 150 dragon, they will surely lose. Because of that, the hero understands that he can't leave them like this and shouts for the leader to take him along. At this moment, the monsters he pierced with the poison knife are about to die, and the hero will return to the 200 level range. However, since Ein doesn't know this, he denies the request because he cannot put a level 1 in danger. Even so, the hero tries to insist, and just like before, all those judging stares appear around him, asking with laughter what a level 1 would do to help despite the sense of justice he carries. This time, that white-haired man appears again and says that he will speak on behalf of his beloved leader. He then shouts Phil, weakling to stay out of it, which is exactly the same attitude everyone shows, leaving Alka behind. Even after being humiliated, the protagonist knows that if he doesn't do something, there will be casualties. But with his current level, it's no wonder they don't take him seriously. Therefore, he has no choice but to wait and follow the group later. Sometime later, even the leader, who is the strongest, finds himself intimidated by the monster's power. After all, the reports about the opponent being a level 150 flame dragon weren't even close to being accurate. This is actually a disaster-level monster and dragon king who unites all black dragons. This is the Black Dragon King, a giant and imposing monster of level 300 with the title Flaming Destroyer. Obviously, faced with that terrifying being, the leader sees immediate retreat as the only option because they certainly won't be able to handle it alone. At the moment, the most appropriate thing to do is to contact the guild to reinforcements. However, the dragon is obviously not a monster that will wait until its enemies become stronger. Then with a simple movement of its tail, it launches the leader far away as if he were an insect. From afar, Alka approaches at high speed, worried about the battle and has already begun. Even from that distance, he realizes that the dragon is certainly the same one from the goblin cave. So Alka can hardly believe that the monster regenerated from that state. In any case, he advances knowing that now is not the time to think about it. And the moment the monster prepares a devastating attack gathering the power of flames in its mouth, the protagonist asks the armor how long it will take to recover the levels. To which the system responds that it will take about 30 more seconds, but even at full speed, the dragon's attack is imminent. Then he desperately pleads to get his powers back as quickly as possible, until finally, the experience lights begin to appear behind him and soon merge into his body, confirming the defeat of the monsters by poison and bringing the protagonist back to the level 201 range. However, instead of continuing like that, he requests the flame nullification skill before the monster attacks. The Dragon King launches its fire breath with maximum power, and soon all that massive power heads toward our hero, who, with great difficulty, manages to use the skill he just learned, saving, unfortunately, only one person. Ayan, who happened to be a lucky one, is impressed that the boy managed to stop the breath of the flaming destroyer. And more than that, the white-haired one from before, who is in terrible condition, can hardly believe that a corpse looter is holding out more than they did. In the end, the hero reveals that it's because he is much stronger than all of them. But unfortunately, he couldn't protect them because he was weakened. Therefore, he apologizes for his incompetence and the man collapses to the ground, apparently lifeless. Alka becomes angrier than he has ever been because no matter how strong he gets, lives continue to slip through his hands. So for the sake of the adventurers he couldn't protect, the hero screamed that he will defeat the monster right now. The Dragon King unleashes another powerful fire breath, and Ain shouts for the boy to get out of the way. However, Alpha says it's okay and takes the attack head-on, simply catching it with his hands and crushing it easily. He then states that this kind of fireball won't work. Faced with this, Ain tries to understand what is happening and irritated that he cannot defeat the adventurer. The dragon breathes more fire. However, the hero continues deflecting all the attempts to destroy him without difficulty. At this moment, the flame attacks won't work anymore, but in exchange for the fire nullification, the boy lost a large portion of his level, returning to level 21. In this case, he wonders if he will really be able to surpass the dragon, as well as whether there's any way to increase his level again. Anyway, the Dragon King now prepares a physical charge and nearly hits the protagonist with its claws, demonstrating just how powerful a swipe from such a giant monster can be. Obviously, the hero understands that he won't be able to react to those claws at his current level. But while his attention was focused on the front, suddenly, the monster's tail came toward the protagonist at high speed. And in this situation, there was nothing else he could do to escape, at least on the hero's part, because suddenly someone appeared, commenting that this was a disgrace and with just one strike, cut the dragon in half. Thus, with the monster defeated, this person stood atop the corpse, leaving our hero shocked by the feat. Logically, the protagonist shouts asking who this warrior is. Then with a proud smile, the man introduces himself as Balder, one of the only Calamity-class adventurers on the continent. Alka can barely believe what he's hearing, and comments that he has never met one in person before. It is said that the strength of this type of adventurer creates stories and their deeds create legends. It is an existence that transcends the boundaries of humanity and the warrior who reigns supreme above everything they can reach. This is the meaning of the Calamity class in the adventurer ranking. Faced with this, Balder comments that the green-haired one knows well what he's talking about. And when looking at the system, the hero realizes that the guy really is beyond the limits since he is level 300. Balder is known for being someone born with the ability to break limits, which is the exact opposite of the protagonist's condition. Anyway, he asks if the boy is there to save them, but the adventurer feels offended just thinking about that possibility. Then he states that the two misunderstood because he only came to confront a black-armored adventurer who ruined his plans. Regarding that, the protagonist asks what plans those are, so the redhead starts to explain. After asking the locals, they said that a black-armored hero defended the village from the one-eyed monster. Therefore, Balder was wondering what kind of warrior it was, but was disappointed to find out it was just a weakling. At this moment, the dragon shows that it is not dead yet and moves trying to react. However, the adventurer asserts his dominance by driving his sword and once again to silence the beast since he is in the middle of his speech. Back to the conversation. After educating the dragon, Balder reveals that as long as the core of the flaming destroyer is not destroyed, it will keep regenerating. Therefore, he also reveals that he killed this beast once in the goblin nest, which finally makes the protagonist connect the dots. However, the adventurer states that he didn't destroy the core on purpose, leaving the hero confused, wondering why. The answer was that when the monster ate the flesh of the flaming destroyer, its structure changed drastically, making it go berserk. The Dragon King is so powerful that it could obliterate an entire village, so he needed something a little weaker. Thus, a monster in a berserk state was exactly what he needed to attack the village, and then be killed by the so-called savior of the place. So the second part of the plan would be to defeat the guilty dragon a second time. That way, he could gain more fame than simply killing it with no audience around. Naturally, I'm shocked that this is being said so casually. But back to the complaint, Balder shouts that Alka ruined everything when he intervened in his plan. With his head down, Alka asks if the guy really put the entire village at risk for something like that. Then the adventurer laughs loudly and states that all a Calamity rank adventurer seeks is fame, gold, and women to enjoy life. That declaration was exactly what the protagonist needed to make his decision. Therefore, with a terrifying expression, he declared that it was truly absurd. Since for the sake of his selfish desires, the adventurer let innocent people get hurt and comrades die. All of this because of the guy's enormous greed. Thus, the protagonist asks the Abyss armor to lend him some of its strength, because he will definitely take down this Calamity-class adventurer right now. Obviously, Balder sees this speech as a joke, but also gets furious just because Alka insinuated that he could defeat him. And to display his dominance, he demonstrates a bit of his power by releasing a strong aura. Alka understands that the guy is at level 300 and realizes that if he fights head-on, he will be obliterated since he's only at level 21. But right behind the guy, there's still a chance with that crystal from the Dragon King. That core is on the verge of collapse, so if the protagonist can destroy it and absorb the level of the flaming destroyer, there will be a chance to win. Anyway, the protagonist asks if there's any skill suitable to destroy the core from a distance. Then the system starts searching, but since it takes a few seconds, the Calamity-class adventurer jumps on the protagonist, ready to finish him off. And before he can react, the attack connects, sending both the hero and I'm flying. In any case, the protagonist is the one who gets hurt the most, being dragged across the ground by that devastating power. Thus, he realizes what it truly means to be a Calamity-class adventurer. Balder, in turn, comments that it's a shame he missed but guarantees he won't next time. At this rate, the defeat of our hero is clear, but the system search is completed, and the option to acquire the skill called micro-explosive weapon appears. The skill can make the weapon itself explode, and the cost is 20 points. So the hero asks what he should do with it. Because if he explodes his sword, it won't destroy the core from afar, and doing it with his main weapon isn't recommended. Therefore, logically, the hero questions what he should do. Then the idea that comes is to use the poison knife he used to level up, and now Alka understands the plan. Balder, on the other hand, finds it annoying that the hero is still standing. He shouts that just one punch will be enough. But at that moment, the protagonist requests the micro-explosive weapon skill. Logically, Balder doesn't understand what the boy is doing, but the protagonist doesn't need to explain and simply grabs his knives. Then with great confidence, he states that with this, he will turn the game around and throws all three toward the target. As the blades fly in his direction, Balder realizes they are knives with permanent poison. However, he easily deflects the ones that come near him, complimenting the hero's skill, but also saying it's useless if he can't hit the target, which the protagonist agrees with, but also says that there's no problem. After all, those knives were just distractions for the one that went toward the core. And at the moment when it was close to collapsing, the hero shouted to activate the detonation, causing an explosion in the core, leaving the protagonist proud because with that, the flaming destroyer is finally defeated. And at the very instant the monster dies, all its experience begins to flow out of its body, leaving Balder shocked. In any case, now the levels are absorbed by the protagonist and even without fully understanding it. The fact is that our hero advances toward the adventurer quickly, making the two start clashing. Balder simply couldn't comprehend this power since the hero was at level 21 just a few minutes ago. Then Alpi confirmed that the warrior was right, but only in the past, because now his power is that of a level 301 adventurer. Faced with this, the warrior gets angry because he finally understands how the protagonist defeated that one-eyed monster. It was all thanks to this mysterious ability the protagonist has and filled with rage. The warrior strikes with force, sending the protagonist flying. The redhead then tells the boy not to mess with him since his simple advantage of just one level won't be enough to surpass the experience of an adventurer like him who was at the Calamity class level. With another attack, Balder destroys the ground where the protagonist stands but is surprised when he looks more closely, because our hero uses centrifugal force to land a powerful overhead blow causing another massive destruction. Alka yells, questioning that talk about having less experience, and parries the adventurer's weapon. Then prepared to strike, he states that against a blade stained by greed, he can never be defeated, which he demonstrates with several cuts across the villain's body until Balder also gets furious. With an aura more powerful than ever, Balder praises the courage of the boy in black armor for shouting in his presence. But now his rage is so great that he simply tells Alka to shut up, and activating his epic ability, the manifestation of the god is unleashed. While screaming with rage and releasing his aura, a powerful lightning bolt falls from the sky and strikes Balder directly. Then a transformation starts happening in the adventurer's body, making his hair rise and lightning appear all over his body. Naturally, Alka is very scared, and all Balder can say is the word power repeatedly. Then with the devastating attack, he states that this is the true power of a Calamity-class adventure. And in an instant, it closes and about to hit the hero as Balder shouts for the boy not to run. It is more than clear that if this attack hits the protagonist, it will all be over. So he dodges with everything he has, but understands the extent of the tyrant god's power. Alka thinks he will have to use that thing he found while checking the skills list. It was a special ability that could only be used once. So now the protagonist texts back and shouts to request the ability from the system, which causes Balder to attack again to stop him. However, just as he would be hit by that charge, a shield appears in front of him, with "I'm responsible for his defense," causing the boy to take the full impact and fall onto his back on the ground. Even so, with his last strength, Aang gets up. With deep regret, he comments that if he had defeated the Dragon King from the start, his comrades would be alive. And precisely because of that, he cries desperately, begging the hero to avenge his companions, which Alka accepts because of the boy's sincerity. Finally, the hero requests the skill, and this time what he asked for is the curse of the black armor. Balder, on the other hand, continues attacking non-stop, telling Alka to shut up already. As a massive energy approaches, the system informs that the requested ability can only be used once and asks for confirmation, which the hero gives. With that, the request is confirmed, and the cost will be 1 level plus an optional additional level cost. In this case, while defending himself, the protagonist tells the system to apply the additional level cost. And to acquire this ability, he offers all the 300 levels he has, which is confirmed, generating the level conversion that happens instantly. As if it was something transcendent from the heavens, then Aang, watching everything without understanding, asks who the hell the protagonist is. Naturally, after the conversion, the hero returns to being a level 1 adventurer. Balder becomes curious to know what the protagonist just did. But when he decides to look at the hero's status window, he starts laughing a lot, realizing he's back to being a level 1 warrior. The adventurer thinks that this was the limit of the hero's ability and then charges, expecting to send the boy to the afterlife. However, he couldn't be more wrong because our hero's plan was to drag Balder down with him. At that moment, the curse of the black armor is activated. The redhead is startled because suddenly an evil energy starts emanating from Alka's body. Quickly, this energy envelops the adventurer's body, restraining him in various ways. And even after a short time under this, he realizes that his power is decreasing. Then the hero announces that this is the curse of the black armor. For each additional level cost paid, the ability reduces the opponent's level by the same amount. That said, even if Balder tries to react, nothing will change. Since the additional cost was 299 levels, now that will be the amount taken from the adventurer. With a very serious expression, the hero then asks how many level the adventurer thinks he will have left. Obviously, someone as greedy as him cannot believe in that possibility and screams, begging to be left alone. However, the hero replies with a proud smile saying it's quite simple because now both he and the adventurer are tied at level 1. At the end of the abilities process, Baldur falls from the sky to the ground and still unable to believe something like this can happen, he shouts calling for his magic window. However, the moment he looked, the reality was clear, and finally, the great calamity-ranked adventurer was reduced to level 1. Definitely, the boy had never been so angry, but even at level 1, he gritted his teeth and declared that he wouldn't lose. After all, he was still a calamity-class adventurer, and even weakened. He believed he could beat someone like him. That's what he thought because in an instant, the protagonist appeared with a precise attack, and Soggy declared that in the village of Riel not long ago, there was a man judged for being a corpse looter. This same man was born unable to acquire experience and couldn't level up. However, this whole story wasn't making any sense to Baldur, who shouted for Alka not to mess with him and attacked with his sword, making the hero step back. In any case, Alka continues the story saying that this man was level 1 his whole life. Then he finally reaches the conclusion of this tale, saying it's a shame for Baldur to have been the opposite case of his. After all, the corpse looter, who was the protagonist, knew how to fight at level 1 better than anyone else in this world. Without his arm, the adventurer's womb starts bleeding uncontrollably. However, still under the effect of the tyrant god's ability, Baldur remains standing and holds his sword, saying he hasn't lost yet. However, for the protagonist, that's already enough to decide the battle's outcome. Even in this situation, Baldur is too proud to back down, so he runs and tries to attack the boy from behind, screaming in rage. This makes the protagonist despise the warrior's attitude since he can no longer even maintain his composure. Alka quickly disarms the warrior, and since he insists on attacking, delivers several cuts across his body. Thus, the adventurer takes it all head-on and finally collapses, defeated on the ground. A few seconds later, Iron, who is still able to stand, approaches to talk. He thanks our hero from the bottom of his heart for avenging his companions. However, the protagonist replies with a smile that there's no need to thank him. After all, he also couldn't forgive him and would have fought even if there hadn't been a request. Besides, Alka becomes serious again because apparently, things aren't over yet. With his last strength, Baldur shouts at the boy in black armor. In this state, he acknowledges that he has lost both his arm and his powers as a calamity-class adventurer. And despite not liking it, he informs that for sure, others just as strong will soon find out about this. If he suddenly disappears, his fellow calamity-class companions will try to figure out what's going on. In the end, they are a bunch of very difficult people to understand, but Baldur makes a point of warning that someone else will come in his place and that sooner or later, it will all be over for the protagonist. Alka, in turn, states that if another calamity-class adventurer wants to challenge him, he'll simply have to defeat everyone who comes. Then Baldur laughs, hoping the protagonist won't lose that confidence. In any case, at this moment, he has already lost too much blood, so something starts to glow and the adventurer says his farewell. Ein shouts that this is a teleportation item, and our hero runs as fast as he can to not let him escape. But Baldur warns that if the boy doesn't die alone, the next time they meet, he'll be the one to defeat him. And without giving the protagonist time to reach him, the adventurer is teleported far away into the sky. In the end, he managed to escape, so Ein shouts, asking what you should do since now there's the possibility that he might attack. But for the hero, it's fine to just let him go. Because even if he shows up again in the future, Alka is confident that he won't lose, which is enough to make Ein a little calmer. In any case, it's still a fact that many people lost their lives that day. Ein comments that he will have to report everything that happened to the city where he came from. Then suddenly, the protagonist apologizes to the adventurer's surprise because he has a request to make and needs the boy to listen. Naturally, the adventurer asks if Alka is sure about what he wants, but the protagonist states that he has already decided. Therefore, the two seem happy since our hero's goal now is to leave the village. A few seconds ago, when the protagonist asked for a favor, Ein was wondering what kind of favor someone so strong could possibly ask for. But thinking that he wanted to be taken to another city was something quite unexpected. To be honest, the hero would have liked to continue being an adventurer in this village. But after this incident, those calamity-class adventurers are now watching him. Therefore, Alcod is afraid that someone like Baldur might come again. He doesn't want the place where he was born to get involved once more. And it is precisely because he understands this choice that the green-haired boy decided to accept it. Now that the flaming destroyer is no longer a threat, Ein shows a necklace with a magical communication stone. It was used to request that adventurers be sent to deal with the aftermath. Even after the boy leaves, those warriors will protect the village, making it safe for now. Thus, Alka is very grateful. But while the two walk through the city, Mel watches everything from a distance and quickly runs over very worried. At the moment, when the two arrive at the uncle's bakery, for some reason, the place is closed and the old man isn't there. Eamon asks if the hero has anyone he wants to say goodbye to, and Alka confirms. So the green-haired one suggests that they leave another day. However, Alka still decides to leave since it would be difficult to say goodbye if he met those people. Not only his uncle, but also Mill and Leela. In the end, the protagonist doesn't want to say goodbye to anyone since being involved with him will only cause them to get hurt. Therefore, the two adventurers arrive at the entrance of the city. Before leaving, Aang warns that once he goes, it won't be easy to come back. But the hero states that he has no conflicting thoughts, which allows him to leave without looking back. However, just as he was about to leave, his name was called by the uncle who raised him. Even at that moment, the old man comments that the boy doesn't need to be sad if he's leaving. He happened to hear that the boy was preparing for a trip, so he decided to bake some bread for him. Therefore, the uncle hands it over, and Alka apologizes profusely for leaving the village without saying anything. But once again, the old man asks our hero to smile with a very happy expression. After all, he is sure there's a good reason for leaving this place. The fact is that the old man has been watching the protagonist's adventure life since the beginning. Therefore, he asked to at least see a smile on the boy's face, which after understanding the message being passed, Alka smiles and says goodbye with affection. Later, already a few minutes away from the village, Aang comments that the old man's a good person, and the hero agrees. Then he takes a piece of the bread and eats it in silence, making Aang ask curiously about the taste. Therefore, with a feeling of nostalgia, Alka says it's delicious, making both of them happy. In any case, Aang comments that the destination now is the city where his guild is located, which is the administrative city of the south called Garamu. Thus, with the two about to arrive in the city, Mel informed Leela about what had happened, but it was already too late because Alka had left Rakel behind. Near Doromu, a group of goblins led by one at level 5 ambush a wagon. Aang obviously gets desperate upon realizing that the market wagon is being attacked. Then Alka asks Ian to hold the bag of bread for a moment because this is exactly what he needed, since he wanted to increase his level a little before arriving at the city. Thus, the protagonist defeats all the monsters with ease, absorbing the experience, and the same fate happens to the higher level one, the leader. Therefore, watching everything from a distance, Aang becomes anxious to see how strong the protagonist will become. And after just a few seconds of fighting, our hero finishes off all those monsters, becoming even stronger. Thus, now all that's left is to finish the path to the administrative city of the south. With the two now able to see the people and buildings, Aang comments that they finally arrived, which surprises the protagonist. He then introduces the protagonist to this place, which is the southern administrative city called Daramu. Daramu is a city located northwest of the village of Rakel and is the largest city in the southern part of the continent. As soon as he enters, the protagonist notices that there are many people in the place and that the atmosphere is quite different from what he is used to. But for Aang, this was already expected from the largest city in the region. In addition, it is said that in the center of the place, there is also the southern branch of the Central Adventurers Management Council. Many guilds operate in this city, and there are also many talented adventurers. Therefore, Aang comments that the protagonist will not stand out much there while keeping his level as low as it is now. Currently, the protagonist has risen from level 1 and is now at level 100. In this case, he understands that it does not make sense to increase his power too much when it is not necessary, and he thanks his new friend for this advice. On the way to the city, our hero was trying to raise his level as much as possible. However, at one point, Aang suggested that the boy should not raise his power scale too much. After all, if he entered the place with a very high level, he would attract a lot of attention. For example, if he walked around the city at level 300, the birth of a new Calamity-class adventurer would become a hot topic in Doromu. And if that happens, other adventurers just as strong will notice him. Furthermore, if they discover that the protagonist is the one who defeated Balder, he will possibly have to face a fight in the middle of the city. And many Calamity-class adventurers are also problematic, so it is best to avoid detection. To demonstrate what he is saying, Aang observes a frightened little bunny after the fight, hence the goblins. He comments that normally there is no reason for adventurers to fight among themselves. And with a very friendly expression, he calls the bunny for a hug, saying that they actually exist to maintain peace. Faced with all of this, Alka thinks that Aang is definitely an adventurer he can respect. Generally, the social class is often obsessed with money and fame as in the case of Balder. That is why the protagonist hopes that one day he can become an adventurer like Aang. Since just having a high level is not enough because he also needs to match the sense of justice that Aang has. Anyway, the hero asks where they are going now. Then Aang apologizes for having forgotten to say and reveals that they will visit the Central Management Council to report on the Dragon King case. However, suddenly, Boy's expression becomes darker and this causes doubt in our hero. Already inside the headquarters of the Central Adventurers Council and at the main reception desk, a staff member greets them, asking if he is there to report the conclusion. However, Ein states that he has already reported via magic message, so the girl says she will prepare the reward. But before anything else, she asks with a smile what the completed mission was. And without hesitation, Ein reveals that it was to kill the Dragon King of Rachel Village, which leaves the receptionist in shock given how high profile that mission was. Anyway, she hastily informs that she will bring the reward immediately, and soon places 4 bags full of gold coins on the table, while Ein remains silent. The staff member informs that for this commission, the money from the victims goes to the survivors. However, since Ein is the only one there, he will be the one to receive everything, the girl says, anguished by the situation. Finally, the protagonist manages to understand the reason why his friend seems so sad. The fact that he receives all the money for his fallen friends is basically torture for someone so kind. Anyway, the girl asks Ein to be careful. But when the two leave with the reward, the hero asks him the reason for that. Thus, Ein creates a scenario in which family members or friends volunteer for a team and die, while only the leader survives to receive the entire reward. And in this case, he asks what Alka would think of this leader. In the end, the hero begins to understand, but as soon as they leave the guild, what Ein said becomes clear because it happens faster than expected. If it were possible, he did not want to involve the protagonist in this. But the fact was that now, in front of both of them, many were there to judge the adventurer in the worst possible way, saying horrible things. But these were just the feelings of the families and friends of the deceased. And as the leader of the group, Ein stated that it was his duty to face their anger. In the end, he was the one who led the attack team that resulted in the death of all his companions. And because of that, no matter how much he regrets or fights against it, nothing will change the reality. While the boy endures the pressure, all the people clamor for him to say something about the colleagues who were left to die. Then after listening to each complaint from the citizens and the adventurers' families, Ein states that he will take full responsibility head-on. He agrees that he was unable to save any member of the intervention team and that he eventually let them all die. Then the wave of hatred from the people stops for a moment, but soon returns since some do not care how regretful he is. After all, the attack team was made up of the best of the best. Thus, one of the family members yells that he cannot believe that everyone was killed by a level 150 dragon. Faced with this, Alka realizes that something is wrong with that statement. That monster they fought was actually a level 300 dragon king, which made the group's defeat natural. That's why our hero quickly asked for everyone's attention to explain the situation. However, Ein simply thanked the boy for trying to defend him and continued to carry the guilt for his companions' deaths. For him, if at that moment they had immediately withdrawn and evacuated together with the citizens, everything could have been different. Therefore, Alka tries to argue. His friend does not seem willing to listen. Suddenly, a person approaches saying that what they are saying is nonsense. Because in this man's view, the leader must have intentionally let the others die. That way, he could take the entire reward for himself. Faced with this statement, Alka can no longer hold back and steps forward, shouting that Ein would never do something like that, which surprises his companion. That man in turn tells the hero to shut up, saying he doesn't wanna hear what a foreigner has to say. However, the protagonist states that he's not a foreigner and that in fact, he is an adventurer who fought alongside the leader against the Flame Destroyer, a level 300 monster. Upon hearing this, even the angry family members begin to have doubts because if it's true, someone surviving is a miracle. Still, the man believes the boy is talking nonsense. But despite not wanting to admit it, he realizes that the hero is as strong as he is after checking his status. Anyway, he irritably questions what kind of miracle a level 110 has to survive against a level 300 monster, and the hero replies that he has many. This makes the man laugh a lot, thinking it's a joke. Until he returns to seriousness, ordering the protagonist to step aside, but Alpa says he will not. This creates instant tension between the two, soon begin to confront each other. Only the wind from their clashing swords disturbs the entire place, then Ein yells at Alka to stop. Because the leader's mind constantly thinks that everything happening is his fault since he failed to save his precious friends. And now because he was a useless leader, Alkod is trying to clear his reputation by fighting for him. However, the hero makes sure to deny all these depressing statements. He agrees that it is true that everyone in the attack team was killed. But he strikes the bald man with the conviction that this is not everything because in the end, was just an accident that no one could have predicted. Furthermore, the leader was there for his companions until the very end even when he had to face a much stronger enemy. That's why the protagonist shouts that Ein should not be ashamed because he did not abandon his companions. And with a precise strike, he disarms the bald man, leaving him trembling while standing from the blows he suffered in the duel. In addition, with a proud expression, the hero sincerely asks how someone who cries so much for his fallen comrades can be considered a useless leader. At this moment, the hero states that he will not oppose if his companion truly wants to take responsibility for the team's fatality. However, he says that blaming himself for all of this without clarifying the misunderstandings around him is wrong, because Alka himself wants everyone to know the truth, that Aang was a leader who never ran away no matter how exhausting this situation was. Aang, in turn, with tears in his eyes, asks why the hero is going so far. Ben is sending a hand of his companion. Alpha reveals that it is because he is an adventurer who deeply respects him, which is certainly a good enough reason. Faced with this touching moment, the bald man fills with rage and prepares a dirty trick. Cunningly, he throws a hidden knife from behind toward the two, and since the object was coming at a very high speed, it wouldn't have time to react. That is until suddenly an old man with a sword appeared to put an end to this situation. And with the sword very close to the bald man's neck, this old man commented that he had already been waiting for Ain's return. Alpha remains on high alert and points his sword at the old man because of his intimidating presence. However, Ain pushes the protagonist aside and introduces the old man as the highest authority of his guild, Sword of Salvation. This is the guild master named Jilly, level 200. Alka, in turn, still doesn't know how to behave, especially since the old man seems very angry while talking to him. Anyway, Jilly asks if the boy is the adventurer who protected Ain from the Black Dragon King, which everyone hears with collective surprise that this rumor might be real. Additionally, with the same irritated expression, the old man shows that he also knows that Alka dealt with the fugitive Balder to the hero's surprise. To explain, Ain reveals that he had to be careful with the commission and reported about Balder to the master and to the central management. There was a fact that adventurer had left the monster on the brink of death. However, since it was the protagonist who destroyed the core and since Balder had a malicious intent behind it, the money was paid to them. In the past few days, Jilly had been away from Deramu to face a monster and distant place, and he received Ain's report via magic message while he was there. But when he returned, unfortunately, he came across a bunch of fools blaming the survivor without even bothering to find out the details of what happened to the attack team. Regarding the mourning or regret for the loss of family and friends, the old man states that he will not interfere. However, Jilly shouts that to be an adventurer is to protect peace at cost of your own life. Upon hearing this, the protagonist connects it to Ain's speech when he hugged the bunny. Back to the old man's speech, he says that the warriors died doing exactly that. But placing the blame on anyone else is an insult to all those men and women who risked their lives, which leaves everyone silent. In the end, this clears up the misunderstanding. So protagonist asks if Jilly is on their side, and Ain agrees, but also clarifies that he is not that soft. This becomes clear when it's time for Ain's scolding because Jilly simply announces that the boy is expelled from the guild. Obviously, the protagonist is outraged by this and the boy becomes very sad. However, even if it's a misunderstanding, the old man states that there is no excuse for the boy's lack of competence. Thus, the incompetent leader who annihilated an entire team cannot remain in the Sword of Salvation, which is the most promising guild in Doromu. Despite the initial indignation, the hero manages to understand that this is what it means to be the most powerful guild. And since they are proud of it, Ain accepts his condition without protest, but asks to make one request before leaving, which Jilly agrees to hear. What he actually wants is to recommend the protagonist as a member of the Sword of Salvation. To Alka's surprise, the former leader makes a point of praising him, saying he is a promising adventurer who definitely has competence. And he states with a smile that even if he's expelled, he doesn't need to worry about his future, so Jilly agrees. But right at that moment, Alka shouts that he will have to refuse, which leaves his companion confused about the reason. Alka understands that maybe Ain's expulsion from the Sword of Salvation is indeed inevitable. However, without mincing words, the protagonist states that a guild that cuts off valuable members in this way is not a place where he wants to be. Trying to calm Alka, the former leader starts listing all the benefits that will be given to the hero if he joins. And in addition, he makes it clear that to remain active as an adventurer, one needs to belong to a guild. So our hero asked if all he needs to do is join a guild. And if that's the case, he decides that he will create one with his own hands so the two of them can join. For some time, the two boys actually start walking around the city looking for a place until they finally arrive at where the headquarters of the Heroes Guild can be established. However, upon arriving there, their expressions are a surprise instead of happiness because of the condition of the place. Alka even asks if this is really the right place, but Ain answers with a smile on his face that it is. In the end, this will be the place that will form their base for now. It will not only be the starting point for our hero, but also a new beginning for Ain, who despite the problems of the day is quite happy that the protagonist decided to bring him into his guild, which doesn't seem different from how the protagonist feels. Right at the moment when he declared that he would create his own guild, the hero looked at Ain, who had just been expelled, and recruited the boy immediately on the spot, which although strange, Jilly did not intervene. Back to the present, the protagonist comments that he believes he still has a lot to learn from Ain. So he asked the boy to teach him all these things so that he can become a great adventurer. And so the two shake hands, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Leaving those matters aside upon entering the new guild headquarters, Alka comments that they need to do something about this place first. However, Ain reminds him that it is not an official place and that they also don't have any money. In fact, he is already quite grateful that they managed to take a bit of the remaining money from the reward, because it is explained that most of the money they received for defeating the Flame Destroyer was given to the families of the deceased adventurers, which apparently had been the plan of the former leader since the moment he went to claim the reward. In the end, all that's left for the two are just a few gold coins. And when the protagonist opens one of the cabinets, the dust creates a cloud around his body, which makes him cough a lot and makes Ian burst out laughing. Thus, Alto understands that the priority now is something else. He quickly grabs a mop along with a bucket of water, and the boys prepare to clean the place. As powerful adventurers, they don't take their job lightly. Ain asks the hero to be careful, but it's already too late because he slips on the wet floor and falls on his back with a mop landing on his head. Yet even in a situation like this, Alka keeps his good humor and laughs at his own misfortune. After all, as long as he can use level draining, all he has to do is fight. Besides, for the protagonist, sometimes a day like this might not be so bad. At that very moment in front of the guild, two people show up and abruptly open the gate, asking for permission, which leaves the boys confused. Unexpectedly, these people are the girls from Riel village, Mil and Leela. Mil, in turn, shouts asking how the hero could leave them behind, and Leela agrees. In the end, the two pressure the protagonist to give them an explanation. Meanwhile, during the day, knights are running desperately because of an emergency. And as they approach the entrance of the castle, they shout for anyone who can help to come to the west gate. One of the warriors even calls the city guards for help, which leaves them confused. However, the danger was already certain because the fact was that a terrible monster had appeared along with an army at the west gate. This horrible monster looked very much like a spider and in front of the city guards. A local warrior who had been captured by the beast, unfortunately, even while crying and begging for help, was eliminated right there and then devoured, generating sounds that left the warriors at the very least terrified. This was the first demonstration of the monster's power. Being larger than the walls, its roar made it clear that it wouldn't stop there. Back at the headquarters of the new guild, the girls question once again why our hero left without telling them, as they want a full explanation. So Alka prepares to come up with a good excuse. But right at that moment, someone knocks on the door, catching everyone's attention. It's an urgent call from outside because of the great monster that appeared at the west gate. A warrior who is desperate shouts for any available adventurer to hurry over and help. So Alka calls his friend, who upon understanding the situation immediately comments that they should go there as well. Thus, Alka turns to the girls, and regarding the reason for leaving the village is that he will give the full explanation later. But for now, he asked them to stay there and wait while he deals with the problem, because this will be his first job in the southern administrative city called Doramu. At that same moment at the west gate, people fall into despair upon seeing the enormous number of monsters. After all, this was something that appeared right in front of Doramu out of nowhere. And the leader of this army of small beasts is some type of curse being at level 210. That bald guy from earlier name, Bill, fights against level 20 skeletons and naturally destroys them without any trouble. However, the problem was that the more he destroyed, the more skeletons appeared to be defeated. Still, Bill advances with all this power and defeats yet another horde of them with a single attack. After finishing them off, the bald man asks a guard where Jilly is and hears that the old man said he was on his way. Anyway, Jilly is late because at this pace, a front line will be destroyed. But the worst problem was now felt by Bill because right behind him, that huge monster appeared. And despite feeling fear, the bald man simply starts laughing, especially since several energy cycles were created, making it impossible to react in any way. In the end, all those soldiers and adventurers were cornered by the monster's power, and both Bill and the others were captured by those expanding energy spheres, which made some of them unable to move anymore. Fortunately, this was not a lethal attack, but the bald man notices that it seems to be a demonic curse. A powerful type of curse that starts by numbing the body until it corrupts the victim. Faced with this, a skeleton starts laughing, thinking that the fight will become much easier for them. And since Bill can barely feel his body, he feels disgusted at the thought that he might be killed by this trash. However, that didn't happen because at the last moment, our hero appeared, the threat, and placing himself in front of the adventurer. With the armor skill, the level is absorbed, so Alka calls for Ayan, who responds while defeating several skeletons. Alka wanted to call him to warn that he would start leveling up now. However, despite having advised against it before, the current situation was an exception. Thus, in an instant, the protagonist defeats several skeletons to absorb their powers until he reaches level 250. With that goal complete, Ain informs that Alka can lead the smaller monsters to him, saying that he'll be fine alone. Then Alka understands and starts releasing part of his power, making the monster roar in an attempt to assert its dominance. It seems this is a curse-spewing monster that has already affected many of the city's adventurers. Both a smile on his face, the protagonist jumps over it, saying that now it's the beast's turn to be cursed. And he ironically says that the monster is lucky because apparently loves curses. In the southern administrative city of Doramu at the East Gate, Julie walks outside exuding his immense aura. From what he heard, monsters appeared at the West Gate. But after hearing how noisy the East Gate was, he decided to take a closer look. And there, he found another huge monster nest in the place just like on the other side. As it's facing a strong adventurer, the monster roars loudly. And so the battle between the level 200 adventurer and the level 210 curse-type monster becomes imminent. Surprisingly, this monster copy also has an army of skeletons. And Sudan prepares to use all the curses that were demonstrated before, now all aim at the old man. That's why Julie praises the fact that the monster is not holding back even against just one adventurer. But the old man also states that since he is its enemy, it will be a pity because no matter how many are in the army, it will never match his power. Exuding power, Julie activates his epic skill called Descent of the Demons. In the moment the monsters charge at him, he declares that their lives will end in 15 seconds. Back at the West Gate where our hero jumps over the monster, he reaffirms that he is indeed lucky and strikes the beast with his sword right in the head area. At this moment, our hero is at level 250 and is in the middle of a duel against a level 210 monster. As he lands on the ground, the protagonist quickly cuts off one of the aberration's legs with ease. Then the skeleton army positions itself behind him to attempt to sneak attack. However, the protagonist notices before they can succeed and defeats one with a sword attack and another with a kick. Furthermore, the third and final skeleton has its sword grabbed by the hero who mocks it, saying that the monster has no power to change the course of this battle if that is supposed to be a serious attack. Once again, Alka absorbs the levels from all of them, which brings him to level 290 to the terror of the skeletons. The cursed monster roars as loud as it can in pain and tries to attack our hero in various ways, but he dodges all the attacks. Then that monster launches several curses and Ain shouts for Alka not to let those fears touch him. Although something like that didn't even need to be said because the protagonist drove his sword into the ground, creating a huge barrier of light. And with something like that, definitely no curse could reach him. Bill, in turn, even without being able to move, watches the fight unable to believe what is happening. After all, for him, it doesn't make sense that Alka is the same guy he fought not long ago. Finally, the protagonist manages to cause significant damage to the monster's body, making it fall face first to the ground. Then very close to the beast's face, the hero asks if it is satisfied with all the chaos it has caused. At this moment, it had already cursed many, so the hero commented that it didn't mean to answer. Because regardless of what it said, the monster was destined to die now. As its last breath, the cursed monster moves its eyes wildly to the hero's surprise, causing countless curses to be launched into the air. Alka, in turn, comments that no matter how much it tries, it will never be able to hit him. However, the monster keeps laughing, especially because the target was aiming at was actually the people inside the walls. Unfortunately, Alka realized too late that he had let his guard down, so he quickly defeats the monster. But all those curses remain active and their destination was the city of Doramu. Suddenly, inside the walls, all those curses were seen in the sky by the citizens. And it was at that moment that our hero realized he wasn't paying attention to the monster's true goal. After defeating the cursed beast and absorbing the level of the armor's owner, he reaches level 500. However, Ain still comments that the situation is quite bad. After all, the curse used by that monster wasn't a common one, but a so-called demonic curse, which is a special type that is difficult to break. Furthermore, if it isn't treated properly, it will paralyze the entire body, leading the person to death in the end. Ain is sure that many people in Doramu have already been affected by that demonic energy from just moments ago. So Alka asks if there is anyone in the city capable of breaking this curse, to which the boy replies, yes. However, even within the Sword of Salvation Guild, there are only 3 people with the power to do so, which left the protagonist desperate since there are so few in such a large city. And Ain then adds that those 3 would be only ones capable of doing anything. Suddenly, 2 warriors approach running, asking if everything is okay. Quickly, the first of them extends his hand, saying he will break the curse. And right after, the second kneels down to help with his powers as well. The first one calls Mina, saying that although the curse is quite strong, he will be able to break it. Then another person appears, saying they should hurry and do this for everyone since she won't let anyone die. This is Mina, a high-ranking mage from the Sword of Salvation Guild. Faced with all this, Ain analyzes the situation where the 3 most capable people are there. And, obviously, he becomes quite worried since there won't be any help coming from inside. Despite needing to spread out, Mana can barely handle the power of the curse on a single person. And, unfortunately, she realizes it will take some time even if she succeeds. Still, she also knows that adventurers are not the only ones who should save others because they must also care for the people of the city. But suddenly, a beam of light is launched by the protagonist towards Bill, consuming him entirely to Mina's surprise. The hero knew that if he stood out anymore, the Calamity-class adventurers would notice him. However, despite being fully aware of that, he didn't want to be the kind of adventurer who refuses to save others over something so trivial. The level conversion attempt is a success and the new epic skill is acquired. This is the Golden Curse Break, which releases the golden bullet that disperses all curses. And faced with this, the hero, now level 350, asks if he did the right thing, to which Ain obviously replies yes. With nothing more to discuss, the protagonist extends his hand to launch a barrage of those from each fingertip. And as simple as it seems, he removes the curse from all the adventurers nearby. Mana naturally can't believe that such a tough curse is being broken so easily. So she asks who the protagonist is, but he replies that they'll talk about that later. After all, there are still many people suffering in Doremu, and about that, he asks if the girl is coming with them or not, which makes Meta not only accept without thinking, but also shout that she will join because of her pride as the strongest mage. Therefore, Alka seems happy about this too, and so another one joins the hero's group. Already inside the walls, the protagonist notices how disastrous the situation is since the curse is spread throughout the city. In this case, Alka asked them to start working immediately, especially since he is committed to saving the city of Jiramu. Alka opens the system window and asks the Abyss armor if the preparation is ready. In the weapon request section, he asks for the Holy Wings offering the necessary compensation. Additionally, the protagonist accesses the Sacred Sword completing the weapon conversion. Meanwhile, at that moment, a blue beam of light flashes in an instant. And from that intimidating aura, Jilly emerges unscathed after a one-sided confrontation on his end despite the level difference. Inevitably, the old man arrives at the gate and comes across the whole situation. Unfortunately, the city had been completely covered by the demonic curse. On the inside, however, Alka is working at full speed to save the people from this cruel fate. And with the sacred sword, he manages to effect an entire block with the power of healing. Mana, in turn, goes up to a citizen to ask if he is okay, and unbelievably, he responds that he is, which proves that the demonic curse was completely removed, leaving the girl extremely excited. At her side, Ain comments that there are too many people affected by this. So at this pace, no matter how hard the protagonist tries, because time will run out before he can save the entire city. Sooner or later, there will be victims, and Alka does everything he can to encompass as many citizens as possible. However, even after working so hard, only a small part of the city was freed. In this circumstance, the hero asks the armor if there is a way to use his ability over a larger area. The owner's question is received by the system, which offers a solution. The system recommends the use of the weapon converter, which is a function derived from level conversion. It is explained that by paying the level costs, the effect of an epic ability can be amplified using a special weapon. Therefore, a window appears showing the skill a hero has, which combines the Holy Wings with the Curse Breaker. To obtain a weapon, the hero must say the following phrase, weapon to be obtained, and the activation word is request weapons. Thus, the protagonist summons his sacred sword and activates the weapon conversion, creating a fusion between the angel wings and the sword. With the Golden Curse Break ability at its full strength, the hero points upward with the command to destroy all curses. In the form of an arrow, sacred energy emerges and already following the owner's orders, starts moving through the city, stopping at each citizen along the way. This time, the protagonist's power is enough to affect all of Doremu. Because of that, the hero's companions run over to talk to him. Mina asks if that's really a sacred sword. She wants to know if the hero is actually an adventurer or maybe a saint. However, Alka dismisses the second option, presenting himself only as an adventurer who does what he can to save the city, leaving the girl amazed. Anyway, and Alka calls Ain, saying he needs to talk to him about something regarding this situation. The hero, who definitely went overboard this time. Alka sounds cold because even though it was for the city's sake, if things continue like this, the whole village will notice him. Then with maximum desperation, the hero asks Ain what he should do. But in this case, the boy looks at a person who might solve the problem. And without even thinking twice, he suggests asking Mana for help. Sometime later in the city in front of an important headquarters, several people start talking about what happened. And inevitably, they become very excited, waiting for a certain person to come out the door. So at the moment, Mina appears to everyone. It's like an angel descending from heaven. One of them can barely hold back his smile when seeing the one who saved Doremu from the demonic curse. Mina is now called the Golden Saint by the citizens, which, even though it's a compliment, leaves the girl so embarrassed that she screams in shame. Some time ago at the Central Adventurers Management Council, Mina informed them that it was she who dissipated all the curses, just as Alka had asked. So the protagonist thanked her and did not become the hero who saved the city because Ain's suggestion was made so the mage would receive all the credit for removing the curse. Mina, in turn, said that falsifying a report for the Central Council wasn't exactly acceptable. Therefore, Alka apologized, but since the boy had indeed saved everyone in the city, Mana was happy to at least be able to repay with his favors since she wanted to do her best to help him. In this case, Ain commented that her words were quite admirable. But changing the subject because of a certain noise, he warned that it seemed like people had come to see the Golden Saint who saved the city. Obviously, Mena screams not to be called that, but Ain says that doing this is very important. To explain himself as the girl is one of the best adventurers in the city, there's nothing strange about her being the savior, and that's why they need to give the strongest possible impression. If they can spread the idea to everyone in Deramu that she is the Golden Saint who saved the city, it will certainly divert attention from Alka. And for this objective, the adventurer announces that they are going to put on a spectacular performance. Mina, in turn, is confused because she hadn't heard anything about a performance, and Alka questions whether his friend is sure about this. Then Ain smiles, saying that with the power of the hero, it will be possible to make everyone believe in this story. The girl definitely wasn't expecting something this big, but without caring, Ain simply grabbed her by the arm. And in a quieter place, he told her that he wanted to make her the golden light that saved the city. In this case, Alka would launch a bunch of golden anti-cursed projectiles on her, granting her a golden glow for some time. But despite the plan sounding too simple to be real, Mina asks if what they are saying is that she will be the target of the ability. Then the hero apologizes because that's exactly it, while assuring her that it's harmless to humans. In any case, if the girl continues to oppose it, the hero is willing to stop. However, since she had already said she would do her best to help, Mina once again offers herself to do whatever it takes. Still doubtful, the hero asks if she's sure, but as he hears no response, he simply thanks her. And to honor that determination, he says he will do his best, already firing an energy blast that sends the girl's hat flying. And it was in this way, with the hero's golden curse-breaking magic in full swing, that Mina appeared outside to be praised by the population. While watching everything, Ain asks if the hero could move the wings a little more to the left. Alka then tells the boy not to be ridiculous because his powers are not meant to be used like that. Anyway, the hero comments that is increasingly convinced that Ain is someone who really enjoys playing around. But back to the main focus. With this, the protagonist believes that he will be able to avoid attracting the attention of troublesome adventurers. However, just when he thinks that Jilly appears, Apollo. Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.